It was a quiet evening in the small suburban town of Briarwood, 2022. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone's name, and not much ever changes. At least, that's what it seemed on the surface. The town itself was nothing special, nestled between sprawling farmlands and a stretch of highway that made it easy for people to drive by without noticing. Yet, beneath the tranquility, there was a secret lurking, one that would shake this town to its core. Now, imagine for a moment you're the kind of person who would never expect your life to be turned upside down. You've got the perfect house, a steady job, and a family that loves you. You might think everything is set, that your routine is unshakable. For Emily Matthews, that was the reality. She was in her early 30s, a kindergarten teacher at the local elementary school, and by all accounts, she had the kind of life most people envied. She had a loving husband, Michael, and their daughter, Chloe, was the light of their lives. But no life is as simple as it seems. Emily had always been the type to pour everything into her family. She wasn't one to overthink things or dwell on what could go wrong. For years, she and Michael had built their life around each other, raised their daughter, and navigated the ups and downs of daily life like any married couple would. Their relationship, though not perfect, seemed like something built to last. But recently, things had begun to feel off. Emily couldn't quite put her finger on it. Maybe it was the late nights Michael was working, or the sudden, unexplained distance that had grown between them over the past few months. It was subtle at first, but Emily noticed the small changes. The way he'd come home late from work and immediately retreat to his office, the long silences that stretched between them at dinner. They still shared the occasional smile, but the intimacy, both physical and emotional, seemed to be slipping away. It wasn't until she stumbled upon something one evening that things started to make sense. It was a Thursday, a normal evening. Emily had just put Chloe to bed and was tidying up the living room when she noticed something unusual. Michael's phone. It was sitting on the kitchen counter, not where it usually was. Normally, he kept it in his coat pocket or on his desk. But tonight, it was lying there, face up, a notification blinking on the screen. At first, she thought nothing of it. She knew Michael was always careful with his phone, and she trusted him. But then, she saw the name on the message, Olivia. Now, Emily knew of a few people Michael had worked with over the years, but Olivia was a name she didn't recognize. She hesitated, feeling a knot tighten in her stomach. Was it one of his colleagues? A friend from work? Or was it something more? Her curiosity got the better of her. She reached for the phone, her fingers trembling just slightly. She told herself it was nothing, that it wasn't her business. But as she unlocked the phone and saw the message, her world began to shift. It wasn't just a casual message. It was intimate, flirtatious even. "I can't stop thinking about you, Mike. Can't wait to see you again this weekend." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She stared at the words, blinking, trying to make sense of them. Was this some sort of mistake? Maybe it was just a harmless flirtation, she thought. But then she remembered all the late nights, the strange distance between them. She couldn't ignore it anymore. There was something happening behind her back, something that threatened everything she thought she knew. She quickly put the phone down, a wave of panic flooding through her. Her heart raced. What was she supposed to do now? Confront him? But how could she? Would he even admit to it? For the rest of the night, Emily's mind raced. She barely slept, her thoughts swirling with doubt, confusion, and fear. She knew she had to get to the bottom of it, but the question was, how? In the days that followed, Emily became consumed with the thought of Michael's secret. She watched him more closely, looking for signs that might confirm her suspicions. The little things, the way he'd glance at his phone when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the guilty look he sometimes wore after he'd send a quick text. She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. Her life, which had seemed so stable, was crumbling before her eyes. But Emily wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Michael, for his part, had been feeling the strain of his double life for months. The affair with Olivia had started innocently enough. A few casual conversations at work, shared moments of laughter, and suddenly, it had turned into something more. He hadn't planned for it to happen. It had started with just a few texts, then a late-night dinner, then, well, you can guess the rest. The guilt had gnawed at him from the beginning, but Olivia's allure, her attention, it was hard to resist. And once he'd crossed that line, there was no going back. But now, as Emily's suspicions grew, Michael felt cornered. Every glance, every word, every move he made felt like it was under a microscope. He couldn't let her find out, not like this. He loved her, he really did. But the connection with Olivia had become too strong to ignore. The tension in their home was palpable. They shared dinners, exchanged pleasantries. But the bond that had once tied them together now seemed to be fraying at the edges. Emily had stopped asking him about his day, stopped trying to be the supportive wife. And Michael, well, he was avoiding the inevitable. He knew the truth was coming. He just didn't know how to face it. One evening, Emily decided it was time to confront him. She couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. When Michael walked through the door after another long day at work, Emily was waiting for him. She didn't know exactly how to start, but she knew she couldn't keep silent any longer. As he dropped his keys onto the kitchen counter, Emily stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. "Michael," she said softly, her voice shaky, "we need to talk." He turned to her, his expression guarded. About what? About everything, she thought. But instead of diving right into the confrontation, she decided to ease into it. "Who's Olivia?" she asked, watching him closely. For a moment he froze, his face pale. It was the kind of pause that told Emily everything she needed to know. The look of guilt, the hesitation, it was all there. "She's just a coworker," Michael said quickly, but Emily could hear the strain in his voice. Nothing to worry about. But Emily wasn't buying it. The doubts that had plagued her for days now bubbled to the surface, and she pressed further. "That's not what I saw, Michael. I saw the messages. I know what's going on." His face faltered, and for a second he didn't know what to say. "Emily," he began, his voice cracking, "I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did. And now, I don't know how to fix it." Emily felt a sharp pain in her chest. The man she had trusted, the father of her child, was admitting to an affair. Everything she had built with him seemed to be falling apart, and she couldn't stop it. The conversation stretched late into the night. There were tears, apologies, and a lot of silence. Michael promised he would end things with Olivia, that he would do whatever it took to fix their marriage. But Emily wasn't sure she could believe him anymore. She needed space, time to think, to figure out if this was a relationship worth saving. And just like that, the quiet, suburban town of Briarwood would never be the same. The days following Emily's confrontation with Michael felt like a blur. She had asked for space, but that didn't mean the silence between them made anything easier. If anything, it only heightened the tension. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a battleground. Every room filled with unspoken words, every glance loaded with questions that no one wanted to ask. Michael tried everything he could think of to repair the rift, but Emily wasn't sure what to believe anymore. He apologized again and again, but each time he spoke, the words seemed emptier, less convincing. Emily wanted to believe him. She really did. She wanted to believe that the man she had married, the man who had shared so many dreams with her, could somehow find his way back to her. But with each passing day, the doubt weighed heavier on her heart. As the days turned into weeks, their marriage seemed to become more and more of a routine. They still shared meals, but they didn't talk much. Michael was often distracted, glued to his phone or his work, while Emily withdrew into herself, spending more time with Chloe or going for walks to clear her head. She couldn't seem to escape the feeling that there was something lurking beneath the surface, something neither of them was willing to confront. But even though the silence was deafening, there were moments when Emily wondered if the truth might be easier to bear than the uncertainty. She needed closure. She needed answers. And so, she did something she never thought she'd do. She confronted Olivia. It wasn't a decision she made lightly, but Emily had to know the full extent of the affair. She had to understand if it was something that had been going on for a while or if it was just a fleeting mistake, something that could be fixed with time. And, let's be honest, A small part of her wanted to see if Olivia felt any guilt, if she would apologize or maybe even give her some sort of explanation. Emily reached out to Olivia under the guise of wanting to talk. She didn't want to tell Michael just yet, not until she knew what she was up against. So, one chilly morning, she made her way to a small cafe in town, where she and Olivia had agreed to meet. When Olivia walked in, Emily was already sitting at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee. Olivia was exactly as Emily imagined. Tall, confident, with an air of nonchalance that made Emily feel even smaller. She wasn't surprised when Olivia slid into the seat across from her, a slight smirk on her face. "So, what's this about?" Olivia asked, her voice a little too smooth for Emily's liking. Emily took a deep breath before speaking. "I want to know why you did it." Olivia raised an eyebrow, clearly unfazed by Emily's directness. "Did what?" Emily's eyes narrowed. "Don't play games with me, Olivia. I know about the affair with Michael. I know everything." Olivia didn't flinch, but for a brief second, Emily could see a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt, maybe, or surprise. It was hard to tell. Olivia cleared her throat and shifted in her seat. "Listen," she said, leaning in slightly. "I never meant for things to go this far, but you know how it is. Things happen." Emily's heart dropped. Things happen? Was that the explanation she was getting? Emily wasn't sure if she wanted to scream or cry. Instead, she clenched her jaw and forced herself to stay calm. "Things happen," Emily repeated, her voice shaky but firm. "You and Michael have been sleeping together behind my back, and that's just things happening? Is that how you see it?" Olivia's expression faltered for the briefest moment, but she quickly recovered. "Look, I'm not proud of it, but Michael and I have something. We've had something for a while now, and I didn't know what to do with it. You and him, well, I guess you were busy with Chloe, and things just kind of spiraled from there." Emily felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "You think I didn't know something was wrong? You think I didn't feel the distance between us?" There was a long pause as Olivia studied her, her eyes cold. "You weren't paying attention," she said, as if that explained everything. "And frankly, it's not like Michael hasn't tried to make things work with you, but you were too wrapped up in your own life to see what was happening. Maybe if you'd been there, this wouldn't have happened. But it did. And here we are." Emily's hands balled into fists on the table. She wanted to stand up, to storm out of the cafe and never look back, but something inside her forced her to stay seated. "What now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What happens now, Olivia?" Olivia shrugged, a smile creeping onto her face. "What happens now? Well, you'll have to figure that out. I'm done talking about it. Michael's my problem now." Emily felt her heart shatter. "You think this is just over? That you can walk away and everything will be fine?" Olivia just stood up, tossing a few bills on the table before walking out of the cafe without looking back. Emily sat there, stunned, the weight of the conversation settling in. For all Olivia's coldness, Emily realized she had gotten the answer she needed. Olivia wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't a phase. It was real, and it was tearing her apart. Back home, Emily's world seemed to be crashing down. She didn't know what to do anymore. Michael was still trying to salvage whatever was left of their marriage, but the damage was done. Emily couldn't unhear the things Olivia had said. She couldn't unsee the texts, the lies, the betrayal. She needed space, more than just physical space. She needed time to think about everything, to decide whether she could forgive Michael or if this was the end. And she wasn't sure which choice would hurt more. Before we dive deeper into the twists and turns of Emily's journey, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. What do you think Emily should do? Would you stay or leave? Hit that subscribe button to follow this intense story all the way through. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. As the days dragged on, Emily found herself pulled in two directions. On one hand, she felt an overwhelming need to protect her family, to give Michael a second chance and try to rebuild what had been broken. On the other hand, the hurt, the betrayal, and the emptiness in her heart screamed that she couldn't go on living like this. She needed more than just apologies. She needed a fresh start, a new beginning. Michael, on the other hand, had been doing everything he could to regain Emily's trust. He ended things with Olivia, but Emily wasn't sure if that was enough. How could she ever trust him again? Was he telling the truth? Had he really ended things? Or was he just saying what she wanted to hear? There was no easy answer. Emily was trapped in a cycle of doubt and pain, unsure of what to do next. And as the weeks passed, she realized that things were only going to get more complicated before they got better. As Emily sat in the quiet, dimly lit living room, the weight of the past few weeks finally crashed down on her. The silence between her and Michael had become unbearable, a constant reminder of the fracture that now ran deep through their marriage. She had spent the last few days wrestling with herself, torn between the desire to hold on to her family and the need to escape the constant ache in her chest. Michael had begged for forgiveness, and though he seemed genuine, the damage was done. He had crossed a line, and Emily wasn't sure if she could ever truly forgive him. The betrayal of trust was something she never imagined would happen, and yet here she was, standing at a crossroads in her own life. But then, one fateful evening, Emily discovered something that would change everything. She had been going through some old boxes in the attic, trying to distract herself with mundane tasks, when she stumbled upon a dusty journal, one that she hadn't seen in years. It was Michael's. She had forgotten about it, pushed it aside in the chaos of their lives. But tonight it called to her. Opening it, Emily began to read through the familiar entries. Some of them were filled with joy, recounting trips they had taken together, the milestones of their early marriage, the birth of Chloe. It was a beautiful reminder of the life they had shared, the love they had once held. But then, as she turned the pages, she found something darker. Michael's handwriting had changed. His words became more disjointed, frantic. There were entries about late nights at work, meetings that ran too long, and the strain on their relationship that Emily had felt but couldn't quite explain. The last few pages were what truly shocked her. There, in stark contrast to everything else, was a confession. "I'm in too deep now. Olivia and I never meant for it to happen, but I can't stop it. She's different from Emily. She sees me, understands me. I love Emily, but I don't think I can go back anymore. I don't know what to do. If I'm honest with myself, I don't want to. But I also don't want to lose my family. The guilt is overwhelming, and yet, I can't break free." Reading the words, Emily felt the world tilt on its axis. It was one thing to suspect the affair, to know in her gut that something was wrong, but it was something else entirely to see the raw, unfiltered truth from Michael himself. The man she thought she knew, the man she had built a life with, had been keeping this secret all along. Her mind raced as the journal fell from her hands. The betrayal was even deeper than she had imagined. It wasn't just a lapse in judgment. Michael had been planning, weighing his options, torn between his family and his affair. And Olivia wasn't just a fleeting distraction. She was the person he had chosen. Emily didn't know what to do with this information. Part of her wanted to scream, to confront Michael and demand answers. But she knew it wouldn't help. The damage had been done. She couldn't undo the past, no matter how much she wanted to. Instead, she did what she thought was the only thing she could. She left. That night, Emily packed a bag, took Chloe, and left the house. She didn't tell Michael where she was going, or why. She couldn't bear the thought of facing him in that moment. She needed to clear her head, to think about everything, without the constant reminder of the lies and the heartbreak. She stayed with her sister, Sarah, in a small apartment on the other side of town. It was quiet there. The chaos of her own home seemed miles away. Chloe played with Sarah's kids, oblivious to the storm that had shattered her mother's world. Emily tried to keep herself together, but the tears came in waves. She had loved Michael with all her heart, trusted him implicitly, and now it felt like her entire world was crumbling around her. What did she do next? Should she fight for her family? Or should she walk away, start over, and leave the past behind? For days, Emily wrestled with those questions. She avoided answering Michael's calls, needing the space to think. But Michael wasn't going to let her go that easily. One evening, Just as she was starting to gain some clarity, the doorbell rang. She opened it to find Michael standing on the other side, his face pale, his eyes red from lack of sleep. "I can't just let you go, Emily," he said, his voice cracking. "I know I've messed up.
I've hurt you.
But I love you. Please, don't leave me." Emily stood in the doorway, her heart torn in two. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the vulnerability that had always been a part of him. But there was also the undeniable truth that he had betrayed her, and that trust could never be easily restored. "Michael," she whispered, her voice shaking, "I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can live in a marriage where I always wonder if you'll hurt me again." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and painful. Michael stepped forward, his hands trembling as he reached out to her. "I'm sorry. I'll do anything. Please, just don't leave me." Emily pulled back, her heart aching. "I need time, Michael. I need time to think. I can't make any decisions right now." Michael's face fell, but he nodded, understanding. "I'll give you time. Just please, don't leave me." And with that, he left. The days that followed were a blur. Emily spent her time focusing on Chloe, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for her daughter's sake. But the weight of the decision that loomed over her, whether to stay or leave, was never far from her mind. And then, just as Emily was beginning to think that things might get better, she discovered something that would change everything again. It was another message from Olivia. This time, it wasn't just a flirtatious text. It was a bombshell. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this secret, Mike. I know you're trying to work things out with Emily, but I need to know where I stand. I'm not going to wait forever." Emily's heart sank as she read the message. Olivia wasn't going anywhere. She was still very much a part of Michael's life. Emily had hoped, for a fleeting moment, that maybe Michael had made the right choice. But this message confirmed what she feared all along. Olivia wasn't backing down. The anger and betrayal that had been simmering beneath the surface finally boiled over. Emily knew now that there was no going back. She couldn't live in the shadow of this affair any longer. The truth was clear. Michael had made his choice, and it wasn't her. The moment Emily read Olivia's message, her world tilted further into chaos. Her worst fears had been realized. Olivia was still demanding answers, still refusing to let go of Michael. For a brief moment, Emily had held on to the hope that things could somehow get better. But the message proved her wrong. This wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown entanglement that Michael seemed unwilling to break free from. Emily sat in her sister's apartment that evening, staring at her phone, the message blinking at her mockingly. She had left Michael's house for peace, for space to think. But this new revelation shattered whatever calm she had built. She felt like she was being dragged into a storm that she had no control over. Olivia's words echoed in her mind. "I'm not going to wait forever." The anger was like fire in her veins. For months, she had been doubting herself, questioning her marriage, trying to hold it together. But now, as she sat there, the pieces clicked into place. Michael wasn't just unfaithful, he was choosing Olivia. All those late nights, the distance, the avoidance, they weren't mistakes. They were choices. And this affair wasn't some fleeting thing. It was a full-blown relationship that had been allowed to grow and fester in the dark corners of their life together. Emily stood up suddenly, her heart pounding. The fury she felt was all-consuming. She had spent too long being patient, too long holding on to something that had already slipped away. She needed to confront Michael once and for all. No more games, no more half-truths. Without a second thought, she grabbed her phone and dialed his number. Michael answered on the second ring, his voice low, hesitant. "Emily? Where are you? I've been trying to reach you." Emily clenched her fists. "I know everything." There was a pause, a brief silence on the other end, before Michael's voice broke through again. "What are you talking about? I saw the message from Olivia." Emily spat, her words sharp. "I saw everything, and I can't do this anymore. I'm done." Michael's voice cracked, the desperation in it unmistakable. "Emily, please. I told you I'm ending things with her. I've been trying to fix this. Please don't leave me. I don't know if I can believe you anymore, Emily responded, her voice trembling with emotion. You've made your choice, Michael. You've made it loud and clear. The anger, the hurt, it all bubbled up and overflowed. Emily couldn't hold back anymore. You don't get to make this decision for me. You don't get to destroy everything we've built and expect me to just forgive you. You've lied to me for months, and I'm not going to keep living this lie. On the other end of the phone, Michael was silent for a long moment, his breathing heavy. Emily could almost hear him searching for the right words, but she didn't want to hear them. She had heard enough. I'm sorry, Michael finally said, his voice small.
Know I've hurt you.
I don't want to lose you. Emily shook her head, her chest tight. You already have. And with that, she ended the call. The finality of it hit her like a punch to the gut. She stood there in her sister's living room, tears streaming down her face. She had made the decision, but it felt like the hardest thing she had ever done. Michael had been the center of her world for so long, and now everything was changing. She wasn't just losing her marriage. She was losing the man she thought she knew. The man who had been her partner, her friend, the father of her child. As the days passed, Emily felt the weight of her decision settle in. She knew she had made the right choice. Michael had betrayed her in ways she couldn't forgive, and the relationship with Olivia was just the final straw. But even as she stood firm in her decision, doubt crept in. Was she doing the right thing for Chloe? Could she really break up their family? But Emily wasn't just facing internal conflict. There were external forces at play as well. Michael, though devastated, wasn't giving up. He began showing up at Sarah's apartment, desperate to talk, to plead with Emily to reconsider. At first, Emily ignored his attempts, but as the days wore on, the pressure began to mount. He started sending flowers, writing long, heartfelt letters, even showing up at the school where she taught, trying to catch her after work. The tension between them escalated. Emily's emotions were raw, and Michael's persistence only made things worse. She couldn't escape him. It felt like he was everywhere, showing up unannounced, calling at all hours of the day and night. The weight of it all was unbearable. Emily couldn't run from the truth anymore. She was facing a battle for her future, and it was one that would change the course of her life forever. And then, as if the situation weren't complicated enough, another bombshell dropped. One evening, while Emily was sorting through the mountain of messages and letters Michael had left for her, a familiar name appeared in her inbox: Olivia. Her stomach churned as she clicked on the message. It was a simple text, one that sent a chill down Emily's spine. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is Michael. He's mine, and you'll just have to accept that. The words felt like a slap in the face. Olivia wasn't just claiming Michael. She was staking her claim on Emily's entire life. Emily stared at the screen, her heart racing as the truth hit her like a freight train. Olivia had no intention of backing down. She was actively trying to force Emily out of the picture, and now the war for Michael's heart seemed to be escalating. It was then that Emily realized something. This wasn't just about her marriage anymore. This wasn't just about healing the rift between her and Michael. Olivia had become a force in her life that she couldn't ignore, and she wasn't going to let go without a fight. Emily had always been the kind of person who avoided conflict, but now, she had no choice. She had to confront Olivia, face to face, and end this once and for all. The next day, Emily arranged to meet Olivia at a local cafe, the same place they had once shared a casual conversation about their kids. Emily had no idea what she was going to say, but she knew that the time had come to stop running from this situation. When Olivia arrived, she was every bit as confident as Emily had expected, wearing a knowing smile that made Emily want to scream. Without wasting any time, Emily stood up, her hands trembling but her resolve hardening. Olivia, she began, her voice steady. I need to make something perfectly clear. This ends now. Olivia raised an eyebrow, as if amused by Emily's sudden confidence. You really think you can end this, Emily? You think you can just walk away and expect me to disappear?
Mihail's mine.
Emily's heart pounded in her chest, but she held her ground. No, Olivia, he's not yours. He's never been yours. I've been trying to hold on to something that wasn't real, but now I see it. This is over. You need to let him go. For the first time, Olivia's smile faltered, and the tension in the room grew thick. Emily's words had struck a nerve. Emily's words hung in the air like a challenge, their weight heavier than she expected. Olivia's smile wavered for a split second, a brief flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. Emily didn't miss it. She took a deep breath, stepping closer to the table, her voice firm, cutting through the tension that filled the small cafe. "You can't keep doing this, Olivia," she said, her voice low but filled with resolve. "You think Michael is yours, but you're wrong. You're playing a game, and I'm done letting you control the rules." Olivia's eyes narrowed, but instead of the expected anger, she gave a low, almost amused chuckle. "Control the rules? I'm not the one trying to hold onto something that's already slipping away. Maybe you should stop pretending, Emily. Michael and we understand each other in ways you'll never understand." For a moment, Emily felt a stab of doubt, but she quickly suppressed it. This was it. This was the confrontation she had been dreading, and she wasn't going to back down now. "You're wrong," she said again, her voice stronger this time. "If Michael truly understood you, if he truly wanted to be with you, he wouldn't have lied to me for months. He wouldn't have torn our family apart. And you know what, Olivia? He doesn't deserve you." The words were out before she could stop them, and the look on Olivia's face told Emily she had struck a nerve. Olivia stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You don't get to dictate what Michael deserves," she spat, her eyes blazing with frustration. "He's not your property, Emily. You lost him the moment you couldn't see what was right in front of you." Emily stood her ground, refusing to let Olivia's words break her resolve. She knew this was her final chance to take control of her life. "You may think you've won, Olivia," Emily said, her voice cool, "but this isn't over. You may have Michael now, but I'm walking away from this. I'll rebuild my life with or without him, and no one, especially you, will stand in my way." With that, Emily turned and walked out of the cafe, the cool air of the evening brushing against her skin as she stepped into the streets of Briarwood. The confrontation with Olivia had been intense, and as she walked away, she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. It was over. She had confronted Olivia, faced the truth, and now she was taking back control. No more waiting, no more living in the shadow of betrayal. But even as she made her way down the street, a part of her heart still hurt. The truth was, Michael wasn't just an obstacle in her life anymore. He was a ghost, someone she once loved, but who now represented a life that was slipping further and further away. There would be no turning back. Later that night, Emily sat in her sister Sarah's living room, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea, her thoughts a million miles away. It was clear now. No matter how hard she tried to hold on, Michael was gone. And deep down, she knew she couldn't keep fighting for something that was already lost. But then, as if the universe had other plans, Emily's phone buzzed on the table, breaking the silence in the room. She hesitated, already knowing who it was. Michael. Again. He had been calling nonstop, sending messages, pleading for another chance. The desperation in his voice over the phone was something Emily could never quite forget. With a heavy sigh, she picked up the phone, staring at his name on the screen. She didn't know what she expected. Maybe a last-minute apology, maybe some desperate plea for forgiveness. Instead, his message was simple, direct, and unlike anything she had received before. "Emily, I've made a decision. I'm going to end things with Olivia. I've been lying to myself and I've been lying to you. I love you, and I want to try again. I'll do anything to make it right. Please, just give me one more chance." The words sent a shockwave through her. Michael had made a decision? Emily didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more confused. She had confronted Olivia. She had confronted Michael in her heart. But now he was choosing her? Could she trust him? Could she ever believe his words again? Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the phone. The emotions swirled inside her. Anger, confusion, a tiny spark of hope that she quickly tried to squash. She wanted to believe him, She wanted to believe that after everything, Michael could truly change. But how could she? How could she be sure that this wasn't just another lie, another moment of weakness on his part? After what felt like an eternity, Emily finally typed a message back. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Michael. You've hurt me in ways I can't forget. I need time. I can't just go back to how things were. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. For the rest of the night, Emily couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to Michael's words, his promises. She had confronted Olivia, confronted Michael, and yet here she was, still standing at the crossroads, unsure of what to do next. Days passed, and the uncertainty only deepened. Michael's attempts to reach her grew more persistent. He continued calling, texting, leaving messages. Emily had told herself she wouldn't cave, that she wouldn't allow him to manipulate her emotions. But with every message, the line between what was right and what was easy blurred further. It wasn't long before another moment arrived that would push Emily to the brink. One evening, after a long day of work, Emily returned home to find a familiar figure sitting in her living room. Michael. He was sitting there, quietly waiting for her, looking like a man who had been through hell. The tension in the air was palpable. This wasn't just another plea. Something had changed in Michael, and Emily could feel it. Emily, Michael said, his voice hoarse. I know I've failed you. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't fix. But I'm here to ask you to give me one last chance. Not for us, not for Olivia, but for you and Chloe. For the family we've always wanted. Emily's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. She hadn't expected him to show up like this, to confront her in such a direct way. His words struck a chord with her. But deep down, she knew that giving him another chance would mean opening herself up to the possibility of even more pain. But it wasn't just about her. It was about Chloe. Emily didn't want to tear apart their family. She didn't want to have to explain this heartbreak to their daughter. But could she really stay in a relationship built on lies? The decision weighed heavily on her. The silence that hung between Emily and Michael in the living room was deafening. The air felt thick with years of unspoken words, regret, and the weight of a decision that could change everything. Michael's face, worn and desperate, bore the marks of someone who had finally come to grips with his own mistakes. But Emily wasn't sure if that was enough. How could it be? You hurt me, Michael, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. You've crossed a line. And once that line is crossed, can you ever go back? Michael stood up, taking a few tentative steps toward her. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Emily. I'm asking for a chance. A real chance to prove to you that I can fix this. That I can make it right for you, for Chloe, for all of us. She stared at him, her heart aching with the raw honesty in his eyes. Was this what she wanted? Was she ready to risk everything again, knowing how much it would hurt if she was wrong? She could see the pain in his face, but could she forgive him enough to rebuild the family they had once had? I need more time, Emily finally said, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside. I can't make that decision now. I don't know what I want anymore. I don't even know if I want us anymore. Michael's face fell, the tears that had threatened to spill earlier now shimmering in his eyes. I understand, he whispered. I'll give you all the time you need. But please don't shut me out. Don't walk away. Emily's chest tightened as she stepped back, needing the space, both physical and emotional, to breathe. The truth was, she wasn't sure she wanted Michael back. Not like this. There were too many scars, too many moments that she could never forget. And yet, the love she had once felt for him still flickered inside her. Small but undeniable. With a soft sigh, she turned and walked away, leaving Michael standing alone in the living room, consumed by his own regret. The following days were filled with a sense of dread. Emily's emotions swirled as she tried to make sense of everything. The broken promises, the deception, the affair that had torn their world apart. Her mind kept going back to the night she had confronted Olivia, when she had stood her ground and finally broken free. But now, the distance between her and Michael seemed like an insurmountable gulf. Despite her decision to take time and reflect, Michael wasn't done fighting for their marriage. The constant barrage of messages continued, each one more desperate than the last. Emily found herself torn between anger and guilt, wondering if she was being too harsh. Was it possible to heal from something like this? Was there a chance that Michael could change? Meanwhile, Michael's life outside the house had become a whirlwind of tension. Olivia, still lingering on the periphery, had started making more frequent calls, pushing him for answers. Emily's absence seemed to create a rift that Olivia wasn't willing to ignore. She wasn't going to give up on Michael. Not now, not after everything they had been through. And that made the decision for Emily even harder. One evening, as Emily sat alone in her apartment, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Michael. The tone was different, more urgent. "Emily, we need to talk. Olivia knows about us, about everything. She's threatening to ruin everything. I don't know what to do anymore. I need you." The words hit Emily like a punch to the stomach. Olivia wasn't just a passive player in their drama anymore. She was an active participant, pulling strings, trying to exert control over Michael's life. And now, Emily realized, she wasn't the only one who had been keeping secrets. Olivia's threat to expose everything only heightened the stakes, pushing Michael into a corner where there seemed to be no escape. The tension in Emily's chest rose as she tried to process the new information. Olivia had the power to ruin everything. But what did that mean for her? For Michael? Did he deserve her help after everything he had put her through? Or was this just another one of his manipulations, a last-ditch effort to win her back? Emily needed answers, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that the answers wouldn't come from Michael. They would have to come from Olivia. With that thought in mind, Emily made a decision. She couldn't just sit back and wait anymore. She had to confront Olivia once again. This time, it wasn't just about saving her marriage. It was about taking control of her own future, about finally breaking free from the suffocating uncertainty that had consumed her for so long. The following day, Emily arranged to meet Olivia. She wasn't sure what to expect, but this time, she wasn't going to back down. She had no more illusions about Michael's sincerity, and she had no intention of letting Olivia tear her apart any longer. They met at a small park on the outskirts of Briarwood, a place that once felt peaceful but now felt like a battleground. As Emily approached, she could see Olivia sitting on a bench, looking calm and collected as always. But Emily could sense the underlying tension in her body language. Olivia knew this meeting was coming, and she knew it wasn't going to be a friendly conversation. "Emily?" Olivia said coolly as Emily walked up, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I was wondering when you'd show up. I figured you'd want answers. You've been avoiding me for so long." Emily took a deep breath, fighting the rising tide of anger within her. "I don't want your lies, Olivia," she said, her voice firm.
I want the truth.
"What are you trying to do, huh? You think you can just waltz in and take my family? Take Mitchell? You're wrong. This is over." Olivia's face remained calm, but her eyes darkened with something dangerous. "You think you can just walk away, Emily? You think I'm going to let you have him back after everything he's given me? You're mistaken. You'll never get him back." For the first time, Emily saw the desperation in Olivia's eyes. It was raw, unfiltered. This wasn't just about Michael. This was about Olivia's own insecurities, her fear of losing him. And in that moment, Emily realized something. Olivia wasn't just a rival. She was a reflection of the brokenness Emily had tried to ignore in herself. They were both fighting for something that had already been lost. "You don't own him, Olivia," Emily said, her voice unwavering. "And you can't control me. This ends now. I'm done with both of you." As Emily turned and walked away, the finality of her decision hit her with full force. This wasn't about fixing what had been broken. It was about reclaiming her life, about choosing a path that was hers alone. She was done living in the shadows of lies. She was done being part of someone else's story. The war for Michael's heart was over, but Emily's fight had just begun. The weeks that followed Emily's final confrontation with Olivia were a blur of both relief and sorrow. Her decision to leave Michael was, at first, a painful one, But it soon became clear that it was the only choice that could lead to healing. The emotional weight that had clouded her life for so long began to lift. She still had moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if she had done the right thing, but those moments were fleeting. Michael's attempts to reach her grew less frequent, and as he slowly accepted the finality of her decision, Emily began to focus on herself and Chloe. The guilt that had gnawed at her was replaced with a newfound strength. It wasn't that she no longer loved Michael. She still did in some way. But love wasn't enough to keep their fractured marriage intact. She had to love herself first. As time passed, Emily found herself growing stronger. She returned to teaching with a renewed sense of purpose, finding joy in her work and in her daughter's laughter. Chloe, too, seemed to thrive in the new environment. She no longer had to witness the tension between her parents, and though she missed her dad, Emily made sure to reassure her that they would be okay. They were a family, just a different kind of family now. Meanwhile, Michael had begun to grapple with the consequences of his actions. He tried reaching out to Emily one last time, but this time, it wasn't with the same desperation. This time, it was an apology, an acceptance of what he had lost. He admitted that he had chosen Olivia, and that the truth was, he wasn't sure if he could ever truly be the man Emily deserved. He had broken her heart, and now it was too late to fix it. Olivia, too, seemed to fade from the scene. After the dramatic showdown with Emily, she no longer played a central role in Michael's life. She had made her own choices, and now those choices had consequences. Michael wasn't the man she had thought he would be. Without Emily, he seemed lost. And Olivia, despite her outward confidence, wasn't there to catch him when he fell. Emily didn't seek vengeance, and she didn't look for closure from Olivia. She had already given herself the closure she needed. The battle for Michael's heart was over, and Emily was finally free from the storm of betrayal. The final confrontation had been a turning point, not just for Emily, but for everyone involved. Olivia's manipulation, Michael's guilt, and Emily's pain had all led to a point of reckoning. But it was Emily who emerged with the clarity and strength to move forward. She didn't need anyone's approval to rebuild her life. She was strong enough to face the future on her own. One sunny afternoon, as Emily watched Chloe play in the yard, she felt a deep sense of peace. The house was quieter now, but there was a calmness that had settled into their lives. She had learned so much through the turmoil, that love is not a one-way street, that it's okay to walk away when something isn't right, and that the most important relationship you have is the one with yourself. Michael's presence in her life had been one of the most significant chapters. It was a chapter that had come to an end, but it wasn't the end of her story. Emily was still writing her own narrative, and it wasn't defined by Michael or Olivia or anyone else. It was hers to craft, hers to shape. She had learned to put herself first, to let go of what wasn't serving her, and to build the life she deserved. Chloe, always the bright spark, had been the constant reminder that there was joy in the future, even after the storm. As the days passed and the seasons changed, Emily found herself opening up again, not just to love but to life in general. She reconnected with old friends, spent more time on things that made her happy, and, most importantly, she learned to trust again. Not in other people but in herself. She had finally learned that she was enough. And Michael? Well, he had started his own journey, one that didn't involve Emily. He knew that his relationship with her was over, and he had to accept it. He wasn't the person he had been when they first met, and that was both his curse and his redemption. He had choices to make, ones that would affect his future, just as Emily's choices had shaped hers. But for now, they both had to walk their separate paths, each learning from the past and growing stronger because of it. As the story of Emily's journey came to a close, there was a sense of peace that settled over everything. She had made it through the darkest chapter of her life and emerged not just intact, but stronger. The past would always be a part of her, but it didn't have to define her. She had taken back control of her life, and that was something no one could take away. She glanced at Chloe, who was running toward her with a big grin on her face, and in that moment, Emily realized just how far she had come. She had fought for her happiness, for her peace, and for the life she truly wanted, and she had won. As she bent down to scoop Chloe up in her arms, Emily smiled. The future was bright, and she was ready to face it. And with that, the story came to its satisfying conclusion. Emily had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and uncertainty, but in the end, she had reclaimed her life. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest rewards, and Emily was living proof of that. Thank you so much for joining me on this emotional journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. Let me know your thoughts. How do you think Emily handled her situation? What would you have done in her shoes? And, as always, hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss any future stories. I've got plenty more coming your way.